artists learn to paint in the classical tradition, one of the fundamental skills we learn is how to accurately depict light. After all, as Jamie said, without light we wouldn't be able to see anything at all. So in the beginning, it's easier to observe light in an indoor environment using artificial light. And then you have all the time in the world to observe it. But we can't talk about light without shadow. They're intimately connected and part of the same process. Their relationship creates balance and harmony. Artists use what's called a value scale to break down the range of light and dark into steps. This helps reduce the amount of information that we're seeing. People often say to me, "Oh, you're an artist, you must see so much more than me." But actually, the opposite is true. Around the camera. Actually, I'm trained to see less. Otherwise, it's just overwhelming. Too much information, too many distractions, too much detail that's just not important. So a great example of how we learn to see these values, as we call them, is to squint. So I get my students to do like this. And and it's like you reduce the amount of visual information that you see, so you can see past those details and see the essentials more clearly. And then we can progress from simple forms to complicated scenes, and then extrapolate from what we've learned to create convincing objects, humans, and spaces. Chiaroscuro. I hope I said that. This beautiful Italian word describes the interplay of light, chiaro, and dark, scuro. And the Baroque master Caravaggio is almost synonymous with chiaroscuro. His theatrical inky backgrounds pierced by shafts of light revolutionised the way artists use light in their work. I started this master copy to demonstrate to my students at Lake Tahoe Community College how Caravaggio used the same principles that I was teaching my students to create the illusion of light wrapping around a ball under a spotlight. And chiaroscuro is a great word, but it's not my favourite. My favourite word is penumbra, and it means almost shadow, and it appears around the edge of the umbra, the shadow, and is a transitional space between dark and light. There's a sense of movement and aliveness in that space. So classical work was historically done indoors, and studios were a great, safe place to learn and to take the time to develop highly finished pieces. But in my experience, to grow as an artist, you have to go outside at least some of the time. En plein air is a French term that means in the open air. The Impressionists famously taught us this. However, artists before Monet observed the natural play of light outside their studios. The British artists J.M.W. Turner and John Constable changed the face of landscape painting in the 19th century with their direct observations of natural light. Turner famously had himself lashed to the mast of a ship in a storm so he could observe the effects of light in turbulence. Constable was a bit less adventurous, but he also loved inclement British weather and would go out and do skying, as he called it. I love that he had a verb, an active word for it. I do it too. I also do rivering, dawning, and dusking. And I'm almost constantly painting in my mind. Speaking of inclement weather, coming from Wales, I grew up accustomed to pervasive moisture in the air. What I didn't know until I came to Tahoe a place with usually very dry, clean air, is how moisture and pollutants affect our experience of atmospheric light and colour harmonies. My first paintings of Mount Black were terrible. This isn't a painting. I'd be happy with that, but no, it didn't look like that. There was no sense of distance in my paintings at all. The mountain looked like it was in our backyard. It was bright and crisp and saturated with colour and detail. I was baffled when I painted Welsh mountains. I didn't have to think about why they looked distant. They just did. So I wondered, why is that? Turns out, tiny water droplets in the air act as prisms that refract light and scatter the colours we see. Each colour of light has a different wavelength, so as they scatter we see some colours more than others. Blue light has the shortest wavelength, so distant objects appear blue. This same phenomenon breaks up the clarity of objects far away, blurring lines together, dissolving forms and creating that illusion of space. Now, Mark Twain once wrote that distance lends enchantment to a view, and that it's that veiling of clarity that that creates an inviting sense of mystery in an artwork. Smoke and dust do interesting things to the light too, as you might remember from the effect of the candle fire. Do you remember how the yellow, brown, grey smoke obscured the sunlight and created a moody landscape like something out of a dream? And even though it was awful and scary, I couldn't help but being fascinated by it all. And ironically, because everything was enveloped in that same pervasive yellow, brown, grey light, there was visual harmony. And that's what made it feel like we were in another world. And that's because harmony involves a subtle interaction between the behaviour of light and the mind of the perceiver. It's a silent conversation between our eyes, our minds, and the light. When things feel harmonious, everything seems to fit together, to belong. Harmony feels good, it flows. Natural light wraps everything in the same colour palette. And the world is constantly shifting and living and breathing, and light interacts with everything we see, with the raindrop ripples catching the edges of light. Glowing aspen leaves undulate on the water. Tree gaps morph and sway in the breeze. Clouds scud across the sky, and fingers of light scan the landscape. Lines of illumination wiggle on the river, and fog obscures and reveals the world, picking out the silhouette of a single tree for a moment of glory in the dense forest. And you know, that's the most challenging thing for me. Everything's moving. But I do love it. Because my natural impulse is to control everything. And you can only do so much of that working on plein air. I have my setup dialed in, portable easel, I have a palette, an umbrella and a stool, and I can control that to an extent. I place everything where I need it, the same way every single time, so I don't have to think about it. I usually scout the location before I go, noting the time of day and the weather. My favourite times of day to paint are dawn and dusk. They're also the most challenging because of the speed you have to work. If I'm well prepared, I can enter a flow state and respond to whatever dance of light and shade appears around me. There are many ways of working outside, but it seems to me you can either take a mental snapshot of the scene lit as it was when you began, get it down quickly, and stick with that image no matter what. Or you can respond in the moment to what you're experiencing. The shifting light is the most compelling aspect of landscape painting for me, the constant transformation that occurs. Painting isn't instantaneous like a photograph. It's an accumulation of subtle events made evident on the paper. So, I'm learning to just respond to whatever's happening, intuitively selecting pieces of light to paint as they move through my view. And I don't paint all of them, that would be a mess. And I don't consciously choose them either. I just allow what feels right to appear in my painting in the moment. And, you know, as long as the artwork is true to my experience and to its own vision, it works. If I slow down or I overthink it, I'm done for. And it feels like something's moving through me, that I'm just a medium and my job is to get out of the way and allow it to happen without trying. Use the training and practice to become instinct. Thank you. So, what happens when I want to work on a bigger piece like these ones? I can't do those outside. And I want to go deeper as well, so I do have to go back into the studio then. So, I do take photos as well, and then I upload them to a screen that I have mounted next to my easel. But the trick is not to fall into like painted photographs. To avoid that, I keep my sketchbooks and my plein air pieces in view as well, as they remind me of how it felt to be in that place at that time. Sketches remind me of the sounds, the temperature, the smells, the textures, the tactile sense memories. Because those sensations play a significant part in how a painting feels visually. During these longer, slower paintings, I start to feel something shift between me and the paper. And that tactile quality of pastel on my skin keeps me grounded, but the transcendent experience of light lifts those sensations into realms of imagination and dreams. Memories of memories move through my mind, and I watch them without engaging like meditation, and they get woven into the painting like a tapestry. The regular practice of skying, rivering and lighting has taught me to surrender in the moment of painting, to pay attention to how the shifting light feels in my body. Monet once said that for him, the subject of painting was secondary, and that what he really wanted to paint was alive in that space between him and the subject. I get it. For me, what's alive in that space is the sensation of light.
Questions, but I'll save mine. So thank you again, Shelley. Great job. I mean, I felt like it was kind of whisked away, right? It was very, your voice, the slides moving forward, and Jamie brought a lot of interesting little tidbits. I have some follow-up questions about a couple things. But who has a question? Who has a question? Go ahead and just kind of raise your hand. We'll call on you, and if it's specific for Shelley or specific for Jamie, let us know. If it's just a general question, throw it out, and we'll go here first and then to the back of the room.
So